The Forest, a game for those who could imagine what it would be like for Bear Grylls to run into the cast of Amelia's children. In this game I'll experience woodcutting, bow crafting and hunting, some beautiful breaststroke swimming, as well as learning to embrace murderous rampages. Also known as a regular Tuesday for some of you. It all begins on a plane where my spawn has gently fallen asleep after reading his favorite book, a survival guide, because I have chosen to make his life as weird as possible. Luckily for me, the cheap airline that I booked with agreed to help me test his knowledge during this little trip.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are now crossing a zone of turbulence. Please return to your seats and keep your seatbelts fastened.
Needless to say, like many fathers, I was immediately disappointed by his choices. Timmy, you beautiful stain bucket, stop! God damn it, Timmy. As I woke up, I noticed a man covered in red paint kidnapping Timmy from the wreckage of the plane. I tried my best to crawl towards the red man in order to warn him that my child was not worth it, but sadly for the red man, I wasn't healthy enough. As I started to wake up from my power nap, there were a few important questions on my mind. Firstly, how can this much of my blood be outside of my body? I mean, look at that, I look like Elmo from Sesame Street. Secondly, do we get a refund in case of a plane crash? Since the answer was most likely no and there was no witnesses around, I opted to take out my frustration. Finding myself surprised by the fact that there was an axe just innocently lying there, I decided to see what else was innocently lying around to my convenience. Mostly it was food and water. Well, that and a pair of semi-fresh clothes. What a coincidence, right? You saw nothing. It looks better on me anyway. Plus they owe me, come on now. So next I got out of the plane and instantly started checking if everyone's luggage was okay. Being a concerned citizen, of course, I took what I could. Next I decided to take a look at Timmy's little survival book. That's when I realized that the book had more pages than Frank Herbert's Dune book collection. So, as any reasonable person, I started flipping around the pages quicker. Until I came upon these pages here, a to-do list. Basically, long story short, turns out Timmy's book is magical and will be giving me objectives along the way, +1 to the forest for inserting a magical guide, but -1 for Timmy and his hopes to getting into Hogwarts. After that I decided to take a look around. It was evident that I would be there for a while. The view was nice. I mean, not the I should buy a house here and live here forever kind of nice, but you know, good enough. There's something real creepy about that mountain, to be honest. After inspecting the view, I decided it was time to go down the hill. Why do something so insane, you ask? I know, riveting stuff. Mostly because I wanted to get into the lake and wash off all my blood. Hygiene's important, kids. Once out of the water, I actually met the local population. It quickly became apparent, however, that these guys didn't have the best manners. What you staring at, liver lips? Turns out insulting them didn't do much, so instead I submitted them to a teensy bit of violence. Oi, Danny DeVito, you see this? If you don't walk away, you're gonna have to be next. Don't make this hard on both of us. He did in fact make it hard on both of us. On the other hand, I couldn't have witnesses around anyway. Next I tried to float away the evidence, and it didn't really go as planned. So I adopted another strategy. At first I just wanted the head, but I got kinda into it, and it may have taken me to a dark place really fast. On the bright side, turns out I can keep all the remains in my inventory. Nice. And once again I went for another swim again, you know, for blood reasons. For some reason, clearly not my fault, it turned night. I basically turned my head left and then back and voila, darkness. The main focus here should be the issue at hand. I'm cold and homeless, so with the survival book I found an easy shelter to build. I started by placing the rocks and sticks that I already had in my inventory. What was missing, however, from this inventory was logs, so I cut down a tree. Turns out that there's this little thing called realism and the forest leans towards it more than I would have thought, so my logs went over the edge. Oh, you've got to be messing with me, I'm gonna put my head through the wall. I did in fact not put my head through the wall, but what I did opt to do was just wait outside until the sun came up. I was hungry, thirsty, and very confused. Once I felt ready, I started a new build. This time around I was going to make a proper shack, because nothing says stability more than being a shack owner. Also, I cut a lot of trees. Perfection, looks just like the Cabin in the Woods movie. I even have an ocean view window. I'm freaking great at this. Now that I had a roof over my head, I really needed to figure out how to get food and water into my system, and I had completely forgotten about the fact that I scavenged from the plane. But as a long-time carnivore, I figured eating the animals around should be straightforward enough for me. Look at that, apparently I know how to skin a turtle. Awesome. I guess my Disney princess vibe was glowing because some birds volunteered as tribute for my upcoming feast as well. Why would you come here after I hold another one of your species' heads in my hand? I mean, I won't complain. That's when I realized I could only eat and drink from my inventory, so I had the coke and snacks instead of the animals. My bad, vegans. I also learned that if I clicked on items in there, they could be combined into stuff. I got a bit excited and started clicking on anything and everything that I could. What was I aiming to make? No clue. Your guess is as good as mine. However, because of this click fest, I realized that in my inventory there was a photo. It quickly then became apparent that I had to remember my objective on this island. So I looked into my survival book and discovered that the turtle shell that I had collected before could be used for water gathering. This might be the best water station ever. Once that was done, I decided to make a fireplace to cook all the food that I had. I managed to squeeze it into the house, avoiding the outdoor rain. Also, I managed to light it up with a lighter, which apparently I had on me. To make peace with the vegans again, I decided to cook and eat some of the meat. Now back to the objective. Timmy. Honestly, screw Timmy. I'm making a boat. Timmy would understand. Turns out, sadly, that I need rope to make any type of boat, which, to be honest, makes quite a lot of sense. Because I had already found 2 locals in the area, I figured they had to be living here somewhere, so I searched the woods. Luckily for me, through the forest, I found a village. The village had tons of indicators that they might not have been so friendly, making me feel a bit more at ease with my earlier choices. As I finally stumbled upon some hanging rope, it was quickly made clear to me that I was not alone. Clearly, using words for communicating was not part of their civilization, so like any red-blooded human being, I decided to put them to sleep. Well, one of them. The other one decided that he would rather just leave the area in general, which, let's be honest, is something I should be very grateful for. My health bar was lower than a flat earther's IQ score, and luckily the plane that I had looted before had given me a lot of medication. I continued to loot the village after that, but suddenly ran into one of my fellow plane passengers. He didn't seem to have met the best kind of end. Not putting too much thought into it, I decided to instead focus on the important thing at hand, this amazing box. Much more fascinating than Mr. Pinata over here. Turns out it had drinks in it. Happy days for me. Turns out this was some kind of loot trigger for me, because at this point I started looting everything and anything in the area. They had all sorts of stuff, from bags to rope to cloth and even dynamite and electronics. You know you flew a shit airline when they let you bring your casual dynamite with them on the plane. But I digress. As I stood there, I realized that I had all the rope I needed. They also had a nifty little cave in the village, but I opted to not go there yet because it was turning to night and I'd rather sleep in my cozy bed. Yeah, no, not screw that, man. I made it home safely and tucked in for the night for a good night of sleep. The new day began and my priorities hadn't changed a bit. Timmy was still on his own and I was at peace with that because I wanted my boat. Now we're talking. Feeling like a lumberjack on Ritalin, I deforested the entire area. In fact, I think I spent about 2 days doing nothing but deforestation. So Cargill or BlackRock, if you need a guy, I know someone. Just saying. Fine, deforestation is bad, but can you argue with the results? I made a houseboat. Clearly these IKEA vanes run super strong. I also added a water station, by the way. Next, I took a moment to admire my boat for a little bit, before leaving Timmy to his fate. Let's be honest, he grew up with a survival book. Read and learn stuff if you want to live, don't doom scroll on TikTok. Turns out, however, that the forest wouldn't let me leave him behind, which I guess is fair. I guess the mother of Timmy would have also been a little bit pissed with me if I had just, abandoned him, but to be fair, we could have made a new one. Once back on land, I decided I need to start stockpiling food and water, so I built myself a shelf. IKEA's Billy Spooky, I ain't got nothing on this fine product. Once that was done, my curiosity for the cave had peaked, plus it was daytime, meaning I had the placebo effect of safety. The placebo effect ain't working at all, I hate it here, this is terrifying. As I struggled with my own willpower, I went further into the cave where I found a dead guy that did not look like he came with my plane. He also had a map, which I took. I peeked at it quickly, but apparently I had to fill it in by myself. He also happened to have a compass on him. Not that I know how useful that is in a cave, but I still felt like I should probably take it. About 4 steps further down the cave, I picked up a note saying, "A jealous god punishes a parent's fault on their children," which I think is ridiculous, and I will be using this as toilet paper. As I opted to cruise down the dark cave, I ended up running into my first cave hobbit. Honestly, this could have been really scary. Sadly for him, I was getting a real taste for this whole murder without repercussions thing. At least it was over quick, I guess. Following this little homicide, I decided to look at the map. Turns out the caves are going to be massive, and I've covered nothing so far. Since there wasn't much else to it, I just kept pushing forward. At one point, I even started finding a bunch of sticks. So I figured might as well make a fire, get some heat and light going on. Man, this reminds me of Boy Scouts as a kid. Dark, wet, and burning my parents' money. Love it. As I continued to make more progress on my map, I found snacks on the ground, as well as a part of the toy that belonged to Timmy. I guess this kicked something off inside of me because I went on a murder spree, not because of Timmy, no, but because they broke the toy, and that's just disrespectful. I'm not heartless, though. I did give them a Viking funeral. It had nothing to do with me being curious about the speed a body burns at, no sir. Further down I found some alcohol. Well, technically a lot of alcohol. I couldn't pick up anymore. And also a tape, though I was more interested in the alcohol. Reason being, malted cocktails are a thing, and I support creativity. Speaking of creativity, look at this beautiful drawing of the red man and my Timmy, I think. He might not be a survivor, but he sure is artistic. After a few hours and God knows how many in-game days down here, I eventually hit a dead end. However, I am not a quitter, so I tried making my own path. Turns out though that the forest was not having any of my shenanigans today, and they just let me waste some of my precious dynamite for nothing. With little power to argue, I decided I should probably just head back out. On the bright side, I did find a cassette on my way out, so that was nice. Luckily for me, it didn't take too long to find an exit. I just went with the path I hadn't explored in the beginning, and this one led me more or less straight out to the outer world. Freedom! Thank you, light. As I stood there, I figured, now that I have a map, I can see where I've been all this time outside in the open world. That was not the case. Well, at least there was a village to plunder nearby. In this village, I found a rock that was craving an explosive connection. And being the kind of helpful man that I am, I decided to go through with it at the price of a dynamite stick. Now under this rock I was overjoyed because I saw an image that symbolized a gun. Turns out it was a piece of a gun, 1 out of 8 in fact. I'm not mad, I'm just disappointed. Thinking to myself it couldn't get worse, I had a drink from the lake. Apparently that's also something you should not do, because, well, I just can't seem to catch a break right now. I did however learn one good thing: killing birds gives feathers, and those feathers can be used to make arrows for a bow. Man, I've killed so many birds. With all the required ingredients in my inventory, I started by making myself a bow. Then after that I went ahead and made myself some fancy arrows. And last but not least, I spiced it up by making some of those arrows flammable. As a consequence of spending a lot of time here, I came to realize that I hadn't actually finished exploring the cave, so I made myself a house. Which was more or less just a cowardice save point before squeezing this McDonald's lover's nimble body back into the abyss. Oh goody, that path to the left looks fun. Turns out part of it was actually fun. After descending a sketchy looking rope, I discovered a secret room, a room filled with tons of different stuff which had been quite nicely stashed away into somewhat organized fashion. Now I'm not Sherlock Holmes or anything, but I did end up finding a bucket of red paint here, that and a note that looked like it might have something to do with the plot of the forest story. The note was about an autopsy of a dead person that had suffered multiple stab wounds, if you're wondering. I for one was not busy thinking much of that, since all I could see with my hobgoblin eyes was loot. And boy did I stack up on random items. One of these items, and probably my new favorite thing, was a crisp looking axe upgrade. Was it better than I had? No clue. Was I going to test it? You bet. Now for the part that wasn't fun, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart. Whoever made this room needs counseling. In fact, after this, we can both go together if you want. Who designs a room filled with dead mutant infants? What do you mean? And what is that? Well, that looks like Susan Boyle on a bad day. Feeling braver than a teenage girl sharing a room with Prince Andrew, I opted to introduce myself. Susan, the responsive Satan, however, were not having any of my shenanigans. Drenched in molten cocktail flames, he started to charge at me. And I, having the survival skills of a toddler on steroids, made the best choice of my life, to run away and find a tight spot that Miss Susan here couldn't reach me in. Oh my god! As seen, I was stuck. I took the help of a flare for more visual aid, as well as all the items in my inventory, and I mean everything. I threw Maltas, fire arrows, and the kitchen sink at her. It's over. It's over. I decided to celebrate by offing her last spawn. Before going ahead and checking the map, turns out I had finished 2 caves in one go, which made me happy, as well as curious about how many of these caves there were gonna be. After this, in the horror room, I noticed a rope, so I climbed it to get myself out of the cave, and once again, I was somewhere I'd never been before. Luckily for me, however, there were markers pointing out where I had my shack and boat, so I went that way. Once home, I needed a day off in the dark caves, and I did so well because I spent it wisely by hunting Bugs Bunny and his crew, with good reason, of course. With the skin and fur collected from them, I crafted a few items, all of which had to do with storing more stuff, like stones, arrows, and sticks, more loot for the hobgoblin basically. After that, it didn't seem to take long for the nighttime to come around, so I enjoyed the meat I had collected. You know what goes well with meat though? These unknown tapes I found in the cave. I knew this game was all about suffering and murder. Now this is deforestation music if I've ever heard it. What am I gonna build? I don't know, but I'm gonna build something. I built another IKEA shelf. Yep, I lived to this point. Ended the climax immediately. I hope you're furious. Fine, I didn't just build a shelf, I also built some explosive holders, because apparently using the same IKEA shelf for holding explosives was not allowed. Bit picky if you ask me, but it is what it is. I ended up making 2 of them. Sadly, I was only able to stockpile 1, so I was forced to head back to the cave and restock. Once at the cave, I followed the map and descended with the help of the rope to the storage room. And to no surprise at all, there was plenty of explosives to collect. Feeling a little bit adventurous and secure, I opted to take a new route home. At the time, it felt like a good idea. Keywords being at the time. Oh look, there goes one of the locals. He's just running by. Nope, you keep Mike Powell away from me. As I started covering the map more above land, I noticed something that started to look more like a crater in the distance. Yep, it's a massive hole. It seems to be a big part of the map as well. Since I don't trust myself around the ledge, however, parkour was definitely off the table for now. Instead, I ended up running into this hole in the wall, which I opted to explore instead. Inside, I ran into darkness, as is tradition at this point, as well as this picture that was on the floor. I can't say it was the happiest photo, but you know, art is art. To progress in this cave, I had to demonstrate some physical prowess, which I nailed instantly. Behind the wall, I discovered one of the victims of the plane crash. He had an unfortunate moment. There were also tons of bats in the cave, thinking to myself that I could be patient zero for COVID, which I personally thought was a decent plan in this area, but however, turns out you couldn't really eat the bats though. Maybe that's why they placed this religious thingy in the next room, you know, to judge me. After that, I broke another wall and realized I hadn't checked the map for a while. Seems like we are in the cave just north of the last ones. I can buy myself flowers. Fuck that! Nope, You're not getting me, Alex Jones. So, I guess the Force decided to remind me that I'm here to suffer. I respect it, therefore I decided to make a cozy fire before committing murder. I used the narrow path to safely toss dynamite at Alex Jones. This was a good idea in my head, sadly it led to a different problem after. What problem could that be, you ask? I'm glad you did. Well, it turns out the local naked philanthropists in the cave didn't quite like that I disposed of their cult leader. Some of them even got so violent that I myself, for a brief moment, thought it was over for me. Luckily for me, I caught a break. Can't say it wasn't a close one, though. With little option, I used my only remaining med supply. On the bright side, it sure feels good to see the health bar go back up. Once the health was back up, I briefly looked at the map and understood absolutely nothing. But as habit has it, that's nothing new for me, so I continued onwards. While doing so, I ran into a beautifully aesthetic set holder, which I opted to take. And also this wonderful drawing of the crater that someone had left behind. Still no clue what any of this means though. Eventually I found an exit, which I immediately made use of. This exit wasn't exactly what I was expecting though. The first thing I noticed was more walls and some dynamite. Turns out I had hit a bit of a dead end. The cave that I had entered first was a spiral of sorts that had led me down to a ledge within the crater. The view wasn't half bad though, and there was something interesting at the bottom. Well, guess my airline wasn't the only one that had an issue with air navigation in the area. Sucks to be us! Not having many options, I went back into the cave. There were still unexplored areas that I had to discover. While I go down this little path, I think it's a decent time for me to say thank you for watching the video. I enjoy making these videos, so thanks for sharing the moment with me. Alright. After what seemed like an eternity of walking, I came to the end of a big room where I started hearing multiple sounds from different, well, monsters. Knowing for a fact that this meant I wasn't dealing with only naked philanthropists or locals, I opted to instead use explosives from the get-go this time. This is when I learned something quite vital in my progression phase. Turns out if I stand somewhat of a distance, Jimmy Two Shoes and his buddies over there, they never react to any of my shenanigans. That's right, yours truly discovered that throwing stuff at people from a distance is safer than melee fighting or narrow path running. I know, mind-blowing stuff. Stephen Hawking's who? Well, with nothing but time on my hands and enough dynamite sticks to bring down Norway, I eventually noticed some red mist develop, and at this point I assumed that the area was clear and it was safe. Yeah, that looks safe enough. Feeling a little lost, I decided to scan the map a bit, and I noticed a path I hadn't taken before. So naturally I followed it, and it wasn't very little in the end. In fact, it felt like it was taking all day to get there. But thankfully, eventually it took me to this room, a room filled with more wonderful things than I could dream of, aside from the occasional corpse, of course. I'm gonna be able to start so many fires? In the room I found meds, which I desperately needed, as well as tons of watches, and some soda cans and other miscellaneous items. There was also a fireplace set up, which I decided to light up, which in turn gave me vision to this beautiful masterpiece. Ooh, gimme. Well, looks like it turns out that going into creepy caves is the best thing you can ever do. And with the katana we go whoosh! Oh no! Oh, that was bad. God damn it. Since there was a lot to pick up here, I started by making some explosives. Then after that, I took down some of the drawings on the walls to keep on me in case of toilet paper shortage, as well as I found another piece of Timmy's toy. Yeah, I'll level with you, I forgot he existed. On the bright side, according to the map, we have an exit now, so let's focus on that instead. I decided to climb the rope out of the cave, however I was not done here yet, I was simply in the need of a tiny break from the darkness. Following that, I decided to go home and get a warm meal, as well as pick up some meds and other necessary items from base before returning to the cave again. Oh boy, here we go again. Well, I've been down in caves more than Batman at this point. Once I got myself back into the cave, I went to the unexplored area. And in this area I found a massive open room, filled with a few tents, some philanthropists, and these unforgivable abomination babies. As it would have it, they did make good practice for my new sword. I am still not a fan of them doing kickflips at chin heights, by the way. It's just wrong. It's wrong. That's all. I'm kinda starting to think one of the developers just really hates his nephews or nieces. After the slaughter, I found a box with a photo inside, as well as a path that had an indicator of a dynamite on it. But because I get lost easy, I opted to explore the rest of this room first. Now, is this going to be good for me? I don't know, but I've started building an addiction to cartography, and I want to fill out these blank spots on my map. I ended up finding a little kitchen area, so I used their fireplace for some visual aid and took a quick look at my map to see how far I'd come. After that, I looked at my to-do list in the Harry Potter book. Turns out I finished another cave. This made me oddly happy, but not as happy as I became when I noticed on the table sitting across from me was a beautiful gas-driven saw. Ooh, honey boo boo, we're gonna create so many murders. I guess the forest knew that my dopamine and endorphin levels were peaking because it decided to leave me with the unsatisfactory stick of hitting a wall that I didn't have the correct tools to climb. I'm okay. And I mean, I kind of am, mostly because the unexplored dynamite path still remained and I was more than happy to blow something up to further my cartography. When a new location opened up, I was immediately greeted by a rope. Not that kind of rope, you beautiful freaks. A rope of possibilities. So it turns out the possibilities was a two-step descent, which required a bit of murder for the last part of the descent, but we've done this before. It's like watching popcorn overcook. With the descent completed, I got a bit of a cheeky slap to the face, because suddenly I was awarded a climbing tool, which is what I needed, but you know, kinda late, because it was just now. Being the petty man that I am, I decided that I was going to do that wall later, since I still had one other wall to climb and it was on my to-do list anyway. The floor level path I took showed me to an open room with beautiful water reflections. Well, that or a horrible fall, up to you how you see it. I ended up exploring the bottom part first and found myself a movie tape. And naturally after that I went up again and followed a ledge in the room. Guys, you know those intrusive thoughts we all have? I mean, it was basically my only opportunity ever to hit a human pinata. Come on. Feel free to ignore that. We continued on the ledge further into the cave. I decided to take a look at the map quickly to scan the area. Turns out we had a lot more in this cave to look at than I expected. However, we did find a light source, which logically we could assume meant we were simply at an open part of the crater, just a bit further down. Turns out I'm better at predicting this than I would have thought. Who knew Boy Scouts would eventually pay off so well? Sadly, outside of the view and the safer access to descending, there was not much here for me to work with. There was a path to my right, however, which I took that ended up having an exit, meaning if I wanted to get here without all the murders that I committed, I would have had that option. I guess what I'm also saying is I should have explored more carefully. Well, at least I know where I am now on the map, so that's good to remember for the future. I headed back to the camp thirsty and hungry and decided it was time to indulge myself in some of the camp's luxuries. Speaking of luxuries, I think it's time to expand the base, and for that, I think I should use one of those zipline things for wood. To complete this idea though, I still needed wood, so I tried out my new handy dandy chainsaw, and let me tell you, the satisfaction you get from this thing is mesmerizing. In fact, I enjoyed it so much I ended up deforestating all the trees in my area. All I was really missing was one of those lumberjack shirts and a good beard. So I brought the logs required to the zip line, as well as I robbed the neighbors for some of the rope that I needed. I finalized the zip line and expected nothing but happiness to come from this architectural marvel, so I tried it myself, and I guess the forest wanted to remind me that I was not here to be happy. Now there might be two reasons why this didn't end up working. Firstly, Greta Thunberg left a tree in my path as vengeance for the deforestation, which I get, or two, the ground is too close to the zip line. Well, since I cut that tree down, let's find out. You absolute crust bucket. Oh no. I'm gonna commit a war crime. Well, looks like there's no time better than the present. It's time to move. Hooray! Goodbye nightmare, hello adventures. And so I found a spot with a little pond and a good view. The location around was unexplored, which gave this home base an exciting will he won't he survive the night kind of vibe, which is always exciting. But to prevent the latter from happening too fast, I decided to instantly cut down some trees and set up a house of sorts. In fact, this time around I opted to go with a treehouse. So all I was in need of was 35 logs and a rope. Sorry, pixelated tree huggers, here we go. Well, that's done. Quick, easy, and painless. Let's take a look inside. Required a little bit of muscle strength to get in and might be hard to hang a chandelier, but I think we can make use of this. I don't know how I convinced myself that this was needed, but I have now made a gazebo attachment to the treehouse. Oh, and I also made another zipline for wood. This one works though. Well, sometimes. It's a work in progress. Let's just leave it at that. Anyway, the view from here is kinda cool, makes you sort of forget that the forest game is built on the idea of destroying your soul. And so for that reason, I might keep building for a while. And build I did. I set up a stairway to the gazebo and made myself a cozy fire. Then I took a power nap before making some new fancy IKEA furniture for the gazebo, which gave me a place to store items again. After that I learned that there were crocodiles spawning around my house, so the newfound redneck in me decided that this was fantastic. Now I had meat, hide, and certain types of decorations to put around the house. And lastly I made some explosive holders again, because, well, you know why. It's just good to have. Finding myself restless again, I made the choice to go exploring. Not far away from the new home, I found this cave in a photo, which most likely would lead to another gun piece, so I decided to ignore it and enter the cave instead. God, I forgot how dark it gets in here. Honey, I'm home. Luckily for me, no one responded. The cave itself was actually very small from this side. Inside we had found a few unfortunate passengers dangling as is tradition at this point, as well as a piece of Timmy's toy. Timmy's probably getting nothing else but coal for next Christmas. So, turns out this cave was one of the climbing parts in our previous cave, meaning that the Harry Potter book has officially checked off this part of our task, and that's great. Happy days! I did, however, check the water in the cave because it seemed like there could have been something more to it, but turns out I was wrong, so I looked for adventure elsewhere. Eventually I did end up finding that adventure, and it was on the bottom of the map, in the form of a beautiful boat just anchored closely to the shore. As I found myself strolling towards it, I ended up running into this sad grave. Who died here? I don't know. Who took the Polaroids? I also don't know. Sorry, bud, nothing about a grave in my survival book. I guess I'll just move on. After a brisk swim, I got myself onto the boat, and you know that feeling we all get when we realize we're poor compared to someone? Well, I got that here, and suddenly I didn't feel so bad for the grave anymore. I took a quick look around the boat respectfully at first, before catering to my natural kleptomatic instinct, which led me to finding oxygen tanks that I didn't know was part of the game, but hey, I'll take it. There was also a locked door in the boat. Sadly, even with the help of violence, I couldn't get it open, so I ended up moving on. Since I didn't know what to do now, I continued exploring the woods in the area, and that was when suddenly, mid-map checking, I got spotted by two naked philanthropists. Now at this point I had been in enough caves to know that when they are blue, they come from a cave, meaning that there should have been a cheeky cave somewhere here. I would love to tell you that I had asked politely for directions, however that would be a lie. It had been a while since I was allowed to slice and dice something, so I ended up just enjoying the moment. So satisfying. Turns out I didn't need directions because I found it by myself. I took the rope down and quickly realized that the cave I had entered was both dark and high in ceiling, meaning it could be one of those Susan spots. Fortunately for me, it was just some philanthropists fueled on violent intentions instead. Now because the cave was so dark and there was clearly violence in the air, I decided to use one of the flares, cause living in Fritz's basement was just not a goal of mine today. As I explored, I found one of the missing passengers, as well as a terrible drawing with horrible shading on it and another piece of Timmy's toy. Thinking to myself that I was in a cave further from the others meant I was going to get a new mission from the fancy book. It gave me nothing? Nothing? What do you mean? That's fine, I'm not mad, I'm disappointed, which in this case disappointment leads to a hormonal teenage rampage, where I killed and broke everything in my sight. Luckily for me, I realized I still had my personal goal of becoming a cave cartographer, which of course soothed me. In this already deep cave I found another layer, which was even darker than the first one. So now, because I have watched enough movies about men going into caves, I opted to illuminate this one in advance. Listen, if I get eaten down here, I'm haunting everybody. I'm haunting the kitchen sink as well. I'm haunting everything. Turns out it wasn't so bad down here. Actually, I discovered a friendly skeleton that kindly donated to me a fancy scuba diving kit. So, thanks, Skeletor. So, praying these oxygen tanks were not filled with helium, I entered the dark water and started heading towards, well, whatever was out there. I'm pretty sure this is how that shark movie 47 meters down went down. It didn't go well for them. Turns out the Forest developer team has not seen that movie because my swim trip was actually really smooth. From the water we found a new spot, this one harboring a massive door. Turns out I had to pass an IQ test for opening this door, however. Luckily for me the instructions were clear, however I wanted to make a fire first for visual aid. After that I placed some stones on the podium in front of the door opening it. Being a coward I opted to just open it a tiny bit so I could just see in first. Oh good, more darkness, yay! I decided I might need a better light for this part, so I switched to a flashlight that I had found earlier. Fortunately for me, there wasn't much in here except for a little cult gathering of skeletons, a voodoo wall, and some tents, so that was quite nice. I will agree the obsession for the wall was sort of intense, however I sort of expect that when I find an unknown religious book somewhere in a room like this, as well as a photo of our Lord and Savior, Susan. Now you look at this photo and you tell me you wouldn't pray to something. Yeah, I'm on their side, I get it. Feeling accomplished, I took a quick glimpse of my map and realized I was done here. The only thing that remained was a puddle of water, which I assumed would lead me to whatever else remained. Turns out it led me to the exit of the cave, and like Tim Robbins in Shawshank Redemption, I emerged from that dark place happier than a kid locked in a candy store. In all honesty, out of all the caves, that one was mostly scary just due to the water. I celebrated nonetheless. Oh, it's over. Oh god. Why are there ducks here? That's so mean. After the duck tantrum, I looked at my to-do list. Turns out we checked off another cave. Thinking to myself that was it for today, I had started heading back. However, the game had other plans because I had almost instantly ran into this entrance right here. I know what you're thinking, Happy, you don't have to do this straight away. That's where you're wrong though. I'm finishing this damn cave map if it kills me. Moving on, after a short walk in a narrow corridor, I ran into a rope, which has always wanted me to descend further. I made my way into the cave and found it mostly quite peaceful. I mean, sure there was your standard hanging corpse here and there, but at this point it felt about as common as finding a Starbucks in the big city. So it wasn't really a big issue anymore. I spent quite a bit of time walking around checking my map, and no matter how far I went, I was never greeted by any of the naked philanthropists. I almost started to miss them in all honesty. I pushed forward nevertheless, breaking anything and everything I could find on my way. That was until I found this descent right here, which by the looks of it harbored about 100 dead bodies. Suddenly I found myself not missing the naked philanthropists anymore. I tossed down a flare as always, but I couldn't really see any movement, which fittingly went quite well with the atmosphere of that room. As I'd chosen to brave the bottom, I found nothing out of the ordinary. It basically looked like my apartment on a Saturday night. Well, there was one thing, a blood-soaked keycard, but I have no idea what it does. I decided it was time to climb out of the pit, and I made sure to replace the batteries in my flashlight as well, since I didn't feel like joining the pile down there myself. Nearby to the rope, I found a room with water, which I decided to explore. When exiting the water, I was in a room lit up thanks to a generator. Now, this was the first time I've seen a generator, so I assumed this room was quite special. I checked my to-do list after that, and I noticed that one of the caves that I had on my list has now been checked off as well. As I wandered around thinking to myself, oh, that was easy, I ended up being wrong. I ran into a group of hostiles all cuddled up in a cuddle spree, and I wasn't invited.
Did they just spawn behind me? Fuck no!
Luckily for me, turns out the cuddlers were not great at swimming. It didn't stop them from trying, of course, but thanks to the water, some of them perished without much effort. I feel like Jim Jones killing his followers. Being in a cult is great. Some of the cuddlers were apparently smarter than the others, however, so I ended up having to come back to the surface and having a talk with them. Fortunately for me, that didn't take too long though. And I guess the sound of cuddling stopping had attracted one of the bigger fellas to check up on the events that were transpiring, since I myself had learned a few days ago that if I kept distance from one of these guys, I should be fine. I just decided that I'd just keep tossing dynamite at it until it went away. And slightly to my surprise, the theory I had was working. The walking hemorrhoid seems far more concerned with his pathing than he did with me. So with time, he just like the others succumbed to a tragic accident that we won't be talking about anymore. Now that was satisfying. Since I gotten quite cold while talking with the population, I decided to use one of the fires at the campsite. I also took a moment to see my progress on the map as well as if there was anything new on my to-do list. There was none. So I continued my adventure, breaking down some random walls I would find on the path, as well as climbing down a bunch of ropes that was just always in the way, and eventually even finding a bunch of rocks that wanted to be blown up by dynamite. As I progressed through the tunnels, I squeezed through a tight path leading into a new big room. Now this room seemed instantly different to me, because for some reason there was smeared blood all along the floor. Turns out it became quite evident who the culprit was. Not wanting to end up like whoever left all this blood here, I opted to use my normal choice of explosives for dealing with this situation. Apparently, however, this guy was being a cheeky little sport and surprised me. Wait, why can he jump? Yeah, I wasn't a fan of that. However, I guess things could be worse. For example, he could have hired someone that wasn't suffering from a stroke to back him up in this fight. Or at least so I thought. That was until I realized he was a secret genius. He had baited me with his dumbest henchman and used the opportunity of distraction to steamroll me. Needless to say, I got a bit worried when I also realized he had the reflexes of Jackie Chan on energy drinks, so before it was too late, I made my way to the narrow path I came in from. Jesus Christ, that was scarier than my uncle's basement. Eventually, after using everything I had, he finally went to sleep. As I explored the room he was protecting, I found one of those moronic motivational texts scribbled on a piece of paper, and now I'm really hoping that it was his blood that was all over the floor. It was also a completely random boat in a puddle of water. My guess an emo teenager lived here previously. I'm sure he or she made it out of here just fine. As I felt I had explored the room, I climbed the rope within, where I met a random fellow traveler just kinda hanging around. Deciding to not put too much thought into it, I just continued my own journey. Once up top, I took a quick peek at my map, noting that there wasn't many ways left for me to cover down here. So I ended up looking around and found some orange tents set up most likely from the rock climbers. One of them had a drawing which spoke levels of trauma. On the other hand, who cares about his trauma? Look, we checked off another cave on the list. Also, the map was looking pretty much done at this point. So satisfied with the cave-dwelling dwarf I've become, I decided it was time to leave.
Oh, that's it for caves for a while. Okay.
It's gonna be a long way home. Eventually, however, I did make it home, and my first plan for today involved making a lovely road. I don't think I've ever committed to adding fine details to a building in my survival experiences before, but I guess the gruesome murder has changed my gameplay style just a little bit. In fact, I even ended up making myself a gardening plot. You see, you get pegged one time in a dark cave and your life changes drastically. Oh, well this is awkward. Okay, so maybe it doesn't change that drastically. It's really just about finding a balance, isn't it? Let's take nature for example. Nature makes plants and food for us, and in return we make fertilizer for it. Let's use this local fella as an example. You see kids, what you do is you place the body in the ground and you make holes in him or her, and then you gently place seeds within those holes. You're welcome guys. Feel free to send me questions anytime. After spending a few days just building roads and birdhouses and more, I decided it was getting to that point in time where I should do something again. No, not save Timmy. What I should do is go back to that boat and make sure this keycard works there. I made my way back to the fancy boat and swam right up to it. Once inside, I didn't waste any time at all. I got myself over to the keycard reader and super excitedly put the key to the door. Guess what? It didn't work. Now you might be wondering how I handled this situation after such a build-up in my head. Well, I'll be glad to let you know I handled it gracefully. I accepted the situation and left without causing a scene at all. Fine, it's a lie. I was devastated. You know how much time I just spent thinking about this while building birdhouses at the base? What the shit, man? Since when doesn't dynamite blow a glory hole into a door? I mean, if I was the people on this boat, I would have been hiding in that room. Now, if you think I'm going home empty-handed, you've got the wrong idea. See, something is coming back with me. Some form of loot in some kind. For example, Bruce here. This head? This is going to be a great trophy for my house. This was the plan all along. Look at that. Absolutely stunning. Feeling rather accomplished as far as the house goes for now, I decided it was time to check off one more thing on the to-do list. The part of exploring the bottom of this pit. And since I remembered that there was a cave that led to a lower area inside this pit to jump down from, I opted to go with that choice. I'll admit it, even with the lower area I still lost health. However, I made it, and that was the important part. Within seconds of looking around from my heightened altitude, I noticed a few things. Firstly, there were a lot of monsters in the area. Secondly, I didn't see an exit, which was worrying since the to-do list was now checked off, but there was nothing new on it. Since I knew there wasn't much of a choice, I decided to pop some medicine in order to heal up before launching a violent approach to anyone and anything I could, which in sorts was a decent idea. However, while looting the helicopter and seeing the reward being a machete, I quickly got reminded that eventually I will run out of long-distance tools to fight with, so I decided to try another tactic, the good old razzle-dazzle sneaking method. Listen, if I get charged by these two things right now, this is going to become a spit roast situation. I'm just not in the mood for it. So it turns out today was my lucky day. I had managed to navigate around most of the creatures and also discovered a method of getting out of this pit. Needless to say, I know it involved somehow going deeper than the bottom of the pit, which sounds like a horrible idea. However, I didn't really feel like I had much of a choice. So I found myself swimming for ages before finding some sort of land to walk on. Once I got out of the water, I was immediately freezing. So in order to have a cozier experience down here, I decided to make a fire and refresh all my stats quickly. I started to head down the only path available, but first I ran into this one drawing. And I'm starting to think that this isn't Timmy's drawings. I know. Big brain here. There was also an interesting clue further up in the same pathway. It was a Polaroid picture holding the same keycard I believe I found in one of the last caves that I explored. In fact, I think it's the keycard I failed to use in the boat. Well, I guess I should be happy that I'm going to be able to use the keycard for something instead of disappointment and tears. Now, I'd love to tell you what happened next was just a happy stroll through a lovely soothing cave. However, this time around, it sure as shit was not. I believe I may have ended at least 3 different family trees on this little excursion, and I'm not even sorry at this point, because most of those guys got quite a few good hits in on me in my health bar, meaning I was constantly using my very limited resources for just staying alive. As I reached the end of the cave, I found this path here that had yet another drawing, this time touching on expressionism. Bravo, whoever drew that. But more importantly, there was a massive door, which, to my happy-chappy surprise, had a keycard reader on it. Listen, if this thing doesn't work, I'm gonna burn something. I don't know what yet. I'll figure it out as I go, but something's gonna burn. Oh, thank you. God, thank you. This would have sucked. if that did not work. Indeed it would have. However, today was a good day. I entered the illuminated hallway filled with red paint. In fact, further down the corridor I found an entire bucket with this stuff, so naturally I decided to blend in with the walls. After embracing my absolute genius, I went for the rope that was dangling from the ceiling. It seemed to be the only way forward from here. I ended up walking along the rafters for as long as I could until I reached a special room. A room filled with pictures of some child. Now, I'm sure there was something fascinating involving this kid, however, I was more interested in the exit plan that someone had made in the floorboards. After a bit of crawling and climbing, I ended up in what seemed to be the kitchen of this massive underground building. The kitchen itself looked wonderful. It had everything you could ask for after a long day of fighting cannibals for your life. There was a candy machine and a soda machine. There was even a bunch of sofas everywhere with some coins dropped between the cushion seats. Basically, it was just your perfect little lifestyle, which didn't make me very happy about the situation that I'd been in for the last few days. So, fueled with my newfound rage, I decided to continue forward, looking for answers. I mean Timmy. And this is where it started to get a little bit weird. I ended up in what seemed to be a makeshift nursery for children, and I didn't think much of it at first. That was until I opened the other door. Ah, goody, is that kick-flipping babies again? I dealt with the little kung fu champions one by one. However, the real interesting part was the room they came from. It seems like it was an observation deck of some sorts. Well, this is horrifying and my day's ruined. Wonderful. Moving on, I realized that it was not only going to be small babies I had to deal with in here. He's looking pretty pissed off, that one, isn't he? Before instigating a sophisticated interaction between lovable Susan over here and me, I made sure to have a long corridor cleared, which worked out much smoother than I would have imagined. After this room, the forest decided to force feed me the clues I had been messing up all along the way. Turns out probably most of the drawings in the area belong to this little girl called Megan, who we saw a photo of earlier. To be fair, no way this girl made all of them. This is beautiful and some of those were just rubbish. Timmy can't draw for shit and we all know it. I am, however, curious how all these drawings got around. I mean, sure, it could be one of these monster guys just casually walking around putting up the kids' drawings, but I doubt it. Someone's gotta explain it a bit to me. I'll teach you to carry children's drawings. Exploring further brought me to a big ominous room with what seemed to be the big box that I had seen on magazines spread out everywhere in the caves. This is where it all gets a little bit complicated, because I decided to open the big black box, and that's where I found little Timmy just, sleeping. Yeah, let's say he's sleeping. Now for a little bit more of an emotional moment for some of you. Alright, you little stain towel, you may have everyone else feeling sorry for you, but I have questions, not feelings right now. Firstly, how do you have a full toy when I never finished yours? Secondly, how dare you put such a horrible thing in my book? This magical book was a place of happiness. It used to tell me how to go gardening, and now all of a sudden it's about murder. What a surprise! After having a little look around, I found the red man. Turns out he had a bad time in this room as well. Well, turns out I ended up finding some blood-covered footprints, which led me to a massive room. The room itself had glass floors where you could see into the cave below. This obviously brought up questions, but none that I could be bothered to ask or deal with right now. As I moved deeper into the room, I ran into a person who fit quite perfectly for the task that I had, and like a seasoned creep, I took a quick look around to make sure that there was no witnesses before having a small chat with the child. Oh, hey kid, so you must be Megan. You want to come with me? I've got this really cool game we can play. You can put up your drawings, you know, do the stuff you love to do. I personally think you should come with me. Yeah, got great ideas for the future here. Megan decided to respond to my lovely question by doing what all small children do when stranger danger shows up. And what's that, you ask? Well, clearly you guys haven't been around traumatized kids. The go-to move is to first simulate having a stroke, then proceed to unleash the 7-foot demon house within your little chest. Luckily for you guys, I can show you what you have to do when something like this happens. No. What is that? That's right, you put the child down. I know it seems a little bit brutal, but honestly, it's for the best. Once Megan was neutralized, I picked her up and took her to the little black box where Timmy was currently hanging out. Now, this is where I ran into a little bit of a snag in my plan. Well, shit. That's not great. Megan, that selfish little turd, had betrayed me. However, she did drop a keycard for a new door to explore, so maybe there were more opportunities to be had. The door that required the keycard was already in the same room that I was already in, so I went ahead and opened that door. I followed the path behind the door and it took me through a maze of rooms. Eventually, however, it got me to this fancy elevator that was just sitting there waiting for me. I got off on the top floor of the building. It turns out the view from up here wasn't half bad. In fact, some would even say it was fantastic. As I continued forward, I ended up in what seems to be the last room of this massive building. A room that was filled with these dark panels and a massive glowing vibrator that hung from the ceiling. Well, isn't this fancy? This is what I imagine it looks like at one of those pharmaceutical headquarters. You know, the ones like Nestle or something where they have a table just looking down at people. Turns out the table here was actually part of a massive system, which would bring me to the choice of a moral kind. See, the table had a computer which pointed out if there were any planes in the area that apparently it could shoot down from me if I wanted, which brings me to the part where I could choose if I wanted to repeat the footsteps of the red man that I first met. I opted to take the plane crashing option. Why, you ask? Well, it's kind of straightforward, really. Timmy's mom was going to be pissed if I didn't, and I happen to be a fantastic father. Did you guys really think I was going to let Timmy die? Come on now. So with a push of a button, I sealed the fate of 3 kids, thus forcing the plane down and embracing the true evil of this game we call the forest. Thanks for watching, guys, and I hope you have a good one.